This is on the Destiny 2 Reddit. Twitter elitism at its finest by DM Me Dicks. I think that already says more than I need to know about this guy, but sure, man. No pussy does to a motherfucker. So not only are you calling him a Twitter elitist, but you're taking a dig as like, as an ego Andy standpoint. Yeah, man, I get so much pussy. When I go on a date, when she asks me what my Reddit username is, my username is DM Me Dicks. Divinity nerf discussion. Removing most of the skill gap during DPS, making precision weapons way too easy to use. Forcing high-risk, high-reward weapons such as Whisper the Worm out of the meta, since they simply can't be buffed. Otherwise, they would be S tier due to Div removing the risk aspect. That is true. For the longest time, I didn't ever come up with a viable solution. I don't think removing the debuff would do much. Teams would still apply a debuff, which means by other means, and use Div on top of it for easier crits. I think that would be the easiest way to nerf it, probably, in my opinion. Reducing reserves or magazine size would probably be pretty insignificant. We can have multiple ways to produce special ammo on demand, and hunters can easily negate low mag downsides by just dodging a reload or throwing a shuriken. There really aren't many viable solutions. Completely reworking the weapon IMO. The guaranteed crits are just too good with certain bosses, and not long ago I came up with an idea that I could that could work while also preserving the gun's identity. If Divinity kept giving the crit bubble but provided a 0% debuff that overrides any other debuff. So that, for example, using Divinity plus Tether resulted in no debuff as long as Div is applied. No, I disagree. If you... Like, being able to hit constant crits is cool and all, but not being able to apply debuffs just kind of gets rid of the whole point of being able to apply debuffs with your subclass in the first place. I do think that getting rid of the debuff for Divinity would be fine, but still being able to apply it in a different manner. Because that's kind of the whole point of building a good subclass build. Divinity, there needs to be a sacrifice made. That's how builds work. There's always there's a technical term for it. Opportunity cost. You give one thing to get another. That's just how these work. That would make it so if you decide to use Div, you sacrifice someone's damage and lose the ability to debuff the target, making it a safe option, but would be worse compared to what a skilled team could pull off by hitting their shots. But here's the problem with hitting your shots, is because there's way too much weapon flinch in PvE. I get shot by a Cabal turret, and... Hold on. I'll show the clip. Just for the sake of this will probably become a video. So... if we're going to get rid of, if we're going to do what Salt says, here's the problem. If we sacrifice anything to run Divinity, and I'm trying to do damage and this happens, I'm uninstalling the game. If you missed that, let's watch it again, but in 0.5 speed, to see exactly what's happening here. Oh yeah, PvE weapon flinch at its finest. Yep, me hitting my shots. Hitting my shots in Destiny 2 is so skillful when I'm aiming straight at the boss and I'm getting tossed around. Like, what? That would make it so if you decide to use Div, you sacrifice someone's damage and blah, 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 blah. This is something that should be easy to implement from a technical standpoint, since we already had in the past lower percentage debuffs that override higher ones, and would make using Div a choice with a strong trade-off. This change wouldn't really affect less skilled teams that want an easy crit while running their weekly raids, since damage checks in normal mode are easy enough, and as long as you hitting your shots as long as you are hitting your shots, a debuff isn't needed. On the other end, it would make it so day one contest raids way more interesting, since an ambitious team would be able to risk not using Divinity to get a higher DPS output by hitting their shots. I agree. But that's the very high end of the skill curve. I'm not against, I'd be down to try what he says here, but I think the most effective way would be to get rid of the debuff on Divinity and be able to apply it elsewhere. Because you don't want to completely kill the point of some subclasses. That's kind of the whole point of Tether. You have two div modes that you can fire and toggle between. 0 debuff with a big crit. Mode 2, no crit, but a 40% debuff when applied. That's an interesting idea. I don't hate that. Apparently, dude, people are so upset about this that it's literally trending on Twitter with 4,000 tweets. I think Div does kind of make the game boring. I think it's a cool exotic, but there needs to be a trade-off. The problem is there's no trade-off for Div. It's only pluses. What it does is that one person sacrifices their damage, but they give the team basically a free constant debuff. You could argue that you're losing one person's damage, but the constant debuff does make up for their damage. But being able to hit your shots and not flinching like the modern clip is why people run Div. PvE flinch is absolutely garbage. That's the piece that's missing from this whole thing. If you get rid of PvE flinch and you actually require players to hit their shots, I think that is more acceptable because you're actually able to hit your shots instead of RNG factors being introduced, such as I get tagged by a Cabal turret, my reticle flies to the moon. There's no skill required in that. There's no skill required in that. Because a lot of the times in the arena, there's no way to block a lane of sight between me and, like, again, just for the sake of example here, a Cabal turret, so that I don't flinch when I'm shooting the boss. Or just give the Whisper its original traits pre-nerf, unlimited ammo as long as you hit your shots. I would agree if Divinity didn't exist. Divinity is such a, like... It is kind of a crutch weapon. It makes things easy. If you don't agree with that, I don't know what to tell you. If you were... It's like if I'm playing darts. Let's just imagine I'm playing darts, and this is a bullseye on the normal board, and then I decide that I want the Divinity board. Oh, here's your bullseye now. Bro, Helen Keller could hit this. There needs to be some sort of risk-reward applied there. Divinity, it is a crutch. I think it's a cool exotic, and I don't think it needs to disappear necessarily, but it needs to be appropriately balanced. The point is that they're forcing other people to use it, but that means if you aren't using it for your team, it is purposely making the encounter longer than it needs to be. Exactly this. It's kind of the... Dude, like, during our run of Kingsfall, we didn't use Divinity. Stupidly. We didn't use Divinity. I tried to debuff Oryx with my tether, didn't work. I didn't know that all other teams were using Divinity. We just kind of forgot about it, and it cost us a lot of damage because of it. We still had runs where we were very close and we lost without using... The only debuff we had was like one tether at times, and that didn't last the whole damage phase. So we lost out on a lot of damage instead of running a free, easy debuff the entire time with a massive crit. Because Div almost makes tether useless as a debuff super. Tether is really good for damage and for clearing big groups of ads, but as far as just using it to debuff the boss, why would you need to do so when Divinity exists? Because Tether doesn't make the crit bigger either. It doesn't. Lower the crit multiplier when using Divinity? That is another option, but I think that I would put that lower on my option list, personally. This is going to be a hot take, Harold, and a half, but I'm convinced the people that are being overly offended by Div being nerfed are the people in life who they'll like, I use this analogy in the YouTube video I'm going to put out later, but like, they're the people that like will go watch a fitness YouTuber on how to get fit, and then they'll buy their magic pill and think they can do 6 push-ups, and then they're just shredded. Like, Divinity just makes crits so easy. There's a lot of different ways you could go about nerfing it without completely killing it, but that's why I think the best solution would be to nerf Div so that the bubble still appears, but it gives no debuff. The bubble just provides a spot to hit crits. And that way you can debuff the boss with your tether or something, or you can stack on top of that. Because it would still make Div really good, but also wouldn't kill it. But I know nobody will come to the logical conclusion for that. They're going to watch this video, they're going to get 5 seconds in, and then start flailing their fingers in the comments. I just want a different meta. I don't want the Div meta anymore, bro. Div is basically required on day 1. It's not required. Here's the other like thing I guess that's missing out of the sphere. Div is basically a requirement on day 1 nowadays. But besides that, you don't need it if you're over-leveled for the raid, because once you're over-leveled for the raid, damage becomes way too easy. So you don't need Div, but people still use it because they want easy mode. But Div should not be a requirement in the end of endgame, aka like day 1 races and stuff. That's the problem. I don't think Salt's a bad guy. I'm pretty with his take there. Like, I agree pretty heavily. I don't necessarily agree with the way he wants to fix it. I think the way that I explained would be a little bit better for both sides. But, yeah, if you enjoyed the video, make sure to subscribe. See you next time, twitch.tv/Sweatcicle. Bye.